I'm Robyn Hutchinson, and I've been making art since I was about 4 years old. Usually, something takes my attention, catches my eye, and I want to do something with it. It can be an object, it can be a surface area, it can be a piece of something, or it can be an experience. It starts with me observing and categorising the stimulus, and I decide whether I want to use it with other things or if I want to actually make it the centre of my artwork and embellish it, enhance it, or even destroy it. So I can find a button, I can find a piece of lace, or I can find a blank canvas, and that will begin a process where I collect things and just put them together. I'm particularly attracted to fibres and to anything that relates to nature. Sometimes those things go together, sometimes they don't. But in this body of work, I found a piece of canvas fabric that was just rolled up, and I decided that I wanted to put things on it. At that point, I had no idea what the outcome would be, but I set it on the floor and I painted some shapes on it, which then became pieces of fruit and images of leaves and just natural forms. I put it away and ignored it for a long time. And one day I pulled it out and I'd found a piece of plastic which I decided would make a great stencil, so I was looking for something to put it on. And this seemed the perfect support. So I did these grids. I printed those on there, and then I decided I needed to relate them to the pairs somehow. For me, line is always relationship. It is the thread. It's not necessarily the physical thread, but is a way that I often join my imagery, whether it's lines like this or lines that meander around. So over a period of time, I drew lines and I collected bits of the string and pulled strings and made threads that were lines and wound them around and just attached them. At one point I decided that this needed to not be a floppy surface, and I got some medium and I made it stiff and I glued it onto a piece of board that I found. I had some cotton sheeting and I tore it into strips. The plan was that I was going to make forms out of it, like leaves and things. I did that for a while, and then I decided I wanted to weave it. I wanted it to intersect, and I got some knitting needles and I just knitted it. I pressed it on with some medium to make it firmer, and I just liked the texture of it. Some of the strips of fabric I actually had tie-dyed or put into a bucket of dye just to create some colours that worked with the rest of the piece. There were other areas that I just used a sponge and manipulated the whole image to create a feeling of landscape, which was fairly unintentional, but I was happy with as it evolved. And that's the piece that I just called Apples and Pears. When it comes to concept, the concepts for my work usually develop after the physical activity. And to me, apples and pears are part of nature, but they're also shapes that relate to human beings, to people, to growth, and to the idea of sowing seeds and things growing, the life-death cycle. So I attach that as meaning, but I usually attach meaning after, not before I create my works. These pieces have the same type of history. They're pieces of canvas that I just decided needed embellishing, needed to be used, and I collected things and glued them on. These are actually pieces of string from this piece of fabric, and this is a piece of lace. I stiffened the lace with glue. I added some other medium to it to give it a spongy effect, and I actually did create a landscape. Up here, we've got got little pieces of plastic thread and nylon, and I just glued them all on. Then got a paintbrush and added colour. This is the last element I added to this piece of work, and I just did it with acrylic paint and a paintbrush to give a little bit of a dialogue between this corner and this corner. But it really is an abstract landscape, it's a collage, but it started with a piece of canvas and a pipe of string. This piece evolved from a strip of hessian. So I found a piece of canvas and I glued the piece of hessian. After that, I once again created something that is a landscape, a collage landscape, using different pieces of material. There's a little bit of fishing line here. Down here, more hessian, some tissue paper and acrylic paint. This piece, again, a scrap of canvas. I had drawn some trees with chalk pastels. I was just doodling, and then I went in to find something to add to give it some texture. So a box of tissues nearby had served my purpose, and these are made of tissue, metallic paint, acrylic, and glue. I just pushed them around with my fingers until they were shapes I liked. Again, there's a landscape element, clearly, with the representation of the trees. And this last one is another piece where I had materials and decided I wanted to assemble them together. This is just tissue paper from a shoebox. Down here is some sand, some glue, and some tea leaves. I pulled apart a tea bag that just happened to be there and used it as one of the elements in the work. There's a bit of hessian here also. And up the top we have tissue paper, again, combined with acrylic paint and some little pieces of string. It evolved to be a landscape, to be something that has a horizon, line, foreground, middle ground, background, and thus it is the image that will definitely represent a scene, maybe the seaside, maybe a lake, but it grew from just the tissue paper. I think I have a natural affinity for making things look like places. Places and spaces are something I've always enjoyed incorporating into my work, my thinking, and the relationship between shapes, colours, textures, and images in my mind is definitely a theme in all my work. Thank you, Karen, for inviting me to be one of the participating artists in A Common Thread, the exhibition we have here at Leeton Museum and Gallery. I've thoroughly enjoyed being part of the inception of this and enjoying working to develop this exhibition with people that I have worked with previously. So Zoe and Hannah have worked with me on costumes in the past, and Cynthia and Natalie are ex-students of mine, and I'm very, very proud of their inclusion and their development of this exhibition.